the only show that's 3 dimensions away from George Lucas writing and directing 7, 8, and 9 of Star Wars. I'm your host, 3D Jake, and today we're looking at Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Released back in 1998. Phantom Menace was directed by George Lucas and written by him as well, and the movie stars Liam Neeson, Ewan McGregor, Ahmed Best, Natalie Portman, Jake Lloyd, Ray Park, Sam Jackson, and Frank Oz. The movie is essentially a prequel to the original trilogy of Star Wars movies that George Lucas co-wrote, which he directed the first one and directed it, but he co-wrote the rest of the movies. This movie is a sole passion project of his that he actually waited years to make this because he was waiting for the technology to catch up. And after him and his company at ILM actually advanced the technology with Jurassic Park, he thought that it was time now to make, because the CGI now was decent enough to make the prequels. And so he went ahead and made them, and here they are. I have to be honest with you. I am a diehard Phantom Menace fan and the original of the prequel trilogy because I grew up with these movies. These were my Star Wars movies growing up. So it was really hard for me to review these, but I'm going to try to be as 100% unbiased as possible because I grew up with these movies, so it's really, really hard not to criticize them. But, to criticize them, should I say. And so I'm going to try to criticize them. I wrote some negatives down and some stuff I really like, but I will be a 100% unbiased. So I will say this movie is well directed. I really like this movie. I really think this is a unique Star Wars movie because this is essentially the beginning of all this. This is basically Star Wars the beginning. And so I really enjoy Star Wars. I've always loved this movie. I own the VHSs. I own the DVDs, the Blu-rays now. I literally had the action figures growing up. I still have my R2-D2 over there, and I still have my Natalie Portman Queen Amidala toothbrush in there. And I have 2 shampoos in there of Jar Jar and, of course, of Darth Maul. And I also have several action figures and merchandise from the movie. I still have a button that says Own the Phantom Menace on DVD. So I'm just a huge Star Wars fan, and I still have my Star Wars figures from that. And I'm just a huge fan of this movie. I really think this movie is unique because, it took years. And if you watch the documentary, I love watching the special features, watching George Lucas, him taking his daughter to school. And then the camera guy's just sitting there and he's just trying to think about ideas for the movie. And he writes down descriptions of Anakin Skywalker and what he looks like, and then he's sitting there and then pulls out a VHS of Buster Keaton and starts watching that, and I just think that's interesting, and I like the whole journey. Did you know when they were shooting in the desert, a giant sandstorm come through and wiped out the whole set, and they had to rebuild the whole set? Just crazy stuff like that. And did you know that in the scene with water on Naboo is actually just salt? It's unique. All this stuff. George Lucas is very creative. And I know a lot of people did not like this movie. Some people still don't to this day like this movie. I know when it came out, it had great reception. It got great reviews. People praised the visual effects, praised the acting, the score, and all that. But I've always enjoyed this movie. I know some people have issues with it because some people feel like that the pacing is not quite on the cue, and some people feel like the directing is not on cue, which I think the directing is fantastic. Some people even think the acting is not on cue, and I've heard people, there's lots of things to complain about, but most people always say the great lightsaber fight and the score is perfect. I've even heard people say the pod racing is fantastic. It's just there were some other things about the movie that people did not like, such as Jar Jar and other things. I will say the things I really liked about this movie, I really love the score by John Williams. I thought that was fantastic. I didn't think he was going to be able to top himself, but he does. The Duel of Fates score is fantastic, and so much more just even, the pod racing score, or, obviously Mole's score, and just everything about it, him just able to top himself on every level, just makes it so much more chef's kiss. I also thought the space battle, at the end of the movie where they're over Naboo, I thought that was great. I really enjoyed it because we had a space battle in almost every movie, so it's really just, I liked how it continues the tradition. I like how there's a space battle there's a battle on the ground, there's a battle of Naboo's on the ground, and it's in space, just like in, of course, in Return of the Jedi. I like how that homages to that. And I also really thought that was great, how Anakin shows like father, like son, like how Luke was blowing up the Death Star, and how Anakin is blowing up, the Trade Federation ships. I also really like the pod race scene. Obviously, the pod race scene was great. I just thought it was great, especially because you feel like you're there. You're actually there. The way it's like almost like a first-person perspective. And I would see this would make a hell of a VR game if they ever did a VR game of this, the pod races, because it's just fantastic. Because you actually feel like you're there. Like every time the camera pans onto the pods and it goes boom, 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 and I'm like, damn. I mean, just like it really feels like it's immersed there, and that's what I think is so unique about the pod racing. And I also think, obviously, the duel. The duel, the Duel of Fates, the duel between Darth Maul and Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon. I mean, that was so unique, it's just like it starts out in a space hangar and then it ends like on a platform. Then it goes into this area like where the hole, and just it's so unique, and it's just like if you were to pitch this, I'm sure on paper it sounds dumb, but then seeing it and you're just like, oh my god, and it's just so unique. I just think that is great. Like, it's one of the greatest battles. I'm sure everyone is trying to fight, like, Mole, because he's such a badass where you're just like, Like, sometimes still when I watch it, I just want to be like Obi-Wan after Qui-Gon dies. Spoilers. And you're just like, I'm ready. Let's go. And you just go, I'm just ready. I'm ready for it. I'm like, let's go fight Mole. Come on. I really like that. And I also thought Darth Maul was really cool. Like, I like how he looks, and he doesn't... I know some people complain that he doesn't say nothing. Like, he only has, 2 lines in the whole movie. And that's mainly because George Lucas wanted to make him look menacing, and George Lucas didn't want to give him any lines. And I understand why, but I like how in the Clone Wars it more humanizes him, it shows him. But at the same time, he just feels like a henchman, mostly. But I do think I really like the way he looks and how he fights, because that really makes up for the no dialogue. But I still have some issues that I will talk about with that. And I liked Anakin. I really thought he was a cute kid. He was funny. He had his great moments. He was heroic. It wasn't annoying. I didn't find him annoying at all. I actually enjoyed him out though. I heard some people complain about Anakin. I'm like, well, he's a kid. You can't really, what was so annoying about him? It wasn't like he was just trying to be like, oh, gee, Willikers. I know some people even said they wanted to see him like a Damien, like the Omen. And I'm like, how would that make sense? Darth Vader is a redeemable person. Darth Vader did not just start out as evil. Like some people wonder oh, I wanted Darth Vader to show up and just be like the Omen. And I'm like, how? Why? That would make no sense, because Darth Vader is not necessarily evil. He was turned to the dark side. I don't understand why he would just be necessarily evil. He has to be corrupted into being evil, because he in his head, he believes what he is doing is right. It's not like he knows what he's doing is wrong. He believes in his head, I am doing what is right. I killed Anakin Skywalker. I am evil. I am Vader. Okay? He believes that in his head, psychologically. And, I really like that the Duel of Fates, like Dave Filoni explained it great on The Mandalorian, or the Season 1 of The Mandalorian behind the scenes, where he explained the reason why it's called Duel of Fates is because it's the fate of Anakin, because Anakin needs that Obi-Wan. Qui-Gon, he needs that father figure, Qui-Gon, and Qui-Gon gets killed, and then Obi-Wan treats him like a brother. Obi-Wan does not see him as a son. He sees him as a brother, and so when he really needed that nature versus nurture, where Obi-Wan really needed to raise Anakin like a father and hear him out and stuff. And instead, he treated him like a big brother, and that's when Anakin just always, chewing him out, telling him right from wrong, and not really giving him the father figure he needed. And so obviously the Emperor became that father figure and corrupted him, because it's like, who am I going to turn on, my father figure or my brother? Obviously he's going to choose the father over the brother, because he hates, he sees his brother as like, oh, you're my brother, you're not my father. And I think if Qui-Gon had been there when Order 66 happened, I think he would have chose Qui-Gon and not, the way it happened. I just think that's what I like about, because it's like the Duel of Fates is over Anakin. Now, this movie is not perfect, obviously. Like, Jar Jar. Obviously, yes, Jar Jar is kind of annoying. It almost feels like it's that goofy character in the movie just that you're going to have. Because I always feel like in the 80s, there was always a goofy character in the movie that would always come off like, oh, that's the annoying character. If you watch Willow, there's annoying characters on Willow. There's annoying characters, and even Return of the Jedi, Ewoks are annoying. But I will say they somewhat held their own, but still they're kind of annoying, and I could see other characters, saying there are other annoying characters that George Lucas has put into stuff like Indiana Jones. There's an annoying character in Indiana Jones that some people could say oh, there's annoying characters in there, but there's all kind of stuff I kind of felt like I kind of feel like, like an Indiana Jones, the second Indiana Jones movie, like the Kate Capshaw's character almost kind of comes off like the goofy, like almost Jar Jar-ish in a way, because she's just always the damsel in distress. Or in the last one, I feel like some parts of it feel like Sean Connery is almost like a damsel in distress there to lecture Indy. And I feel like George Lucas I feel like his intentions were to write Jar Jar almost in that capacity, but he kind of made it more cartoony, and I feel like that was kind of the mishap of that. But I think if he would have just toned it back a little bit, I think he would have had a decent character. But I mean, it's felt fine. It's a kid's character. I could see him easily on like a little cartoon Disney Plus show. And also, I did not like that Darth Maul did not speak. Really, he only had 2 lines. I do like that they humanized him more in the Clone Wars, and Sam Witwer voiced him and made him more of a likable character. You understand his motivations and why he's doing this, and you actually humanize him and see him more. Although I do feel like I'm not really scared of him anymore because of that. I feel like he's just more or less like, okay, you're not as scary, because to me, a villain that doesn't speak, like for instance, Jeepers Creepers, the fact that he doesn't speak actually makes him more menacing than he does speak. So that's why I always let it go. But at the same time, I can understand why you want to hear why he is the way he is. And sometimes it works like Vader, and sometimes it doesn't work. And I think it works, so I'm not really going to complain. That was just a little nitpick I had. But I can see how some people don't have no nitpicks. Also, some people complain that it's too long of a movie. I will say, when I was rewatching this movie, I do feel like there are some parts of the movie where it does feel like, okay, this feels so much longer. Like, okay, from the first half of the movie, okay, I can see they go from the ship to Naboo. Especially if you play the Lego Star Wars, the Skywalker Saga, they go from planet to planet to Coruscant, and it feels like in the movie they stay on Coruscant for such a long time. But then when you get to the game, they go straight back to the in Naboo in a way, because it feels like it almost feels like a game almost, like, okay, we're going from the ship to the planet Naboo to rescue the princess. Then we're going on a space battle. Then we're going to Naboo. They're going to Tatooine. Then we're gonna go to Coruscant. Then we're gonna come back to Naboo. It feels like, but some parts of it feel like, okay, they spend way too much time on Tatooine. But I will say, like, they could have easily cut an hour out of the movie, because they feel like there were some parts that we didn't need, where, like, the blood test scene, I don't think we needed that. There's, like, the council scene with them doing the ship test on Anakin. We didn't need the ship test on Anakin. We could have just easily said, okay, we made our assessment, There's just stuff like that they could easily cut out of. And also, when Anakin goes to visit Padme, and you find out Padme's Queen Amidala, but we don't find it out. But he's just like, oh, where's Padme? Oh, she went to run an errand. We could have cut that scene out entirely because we didn't need it. And there's stuff like that. And just like there's a scene where the Emperor's talking with the Viceroys. I really didn't feel like we needed it on Naboo. I feel like we don't need that scene. Like, there's 2 or 3 scenes that they're just added in there. I feel like we didn't need that either. But, that's just my little nitpicks. And the midichlorians also, we didn't need that. Like, I feel like we understand why in the original trilogy we did not need the midichlorians. Like, then we didn't need to know, like, okay, here, see, this is why. Scientifically, this is why. Also, I understand, like, I can't really fault this. This part I cannot fault. CGI. At the time, when it came out, this was a different time period. Obviously, we have much better CGI now. But at the time, ILM, which is George Lucas's company, was trying to, like, okay, the technology was right. So they tried it. And obviously, there's, like, the texture in the grass you could look at does not look as, like, 100% compared to now, where they would make the grass actually grass and not just, like, it looks like a carpet that they put down. And the sky doesn't look like it's out of a Pixar movie. Which, by the way, did you know, whatever you think about George Lucas for what he did with the original trilogy or what he did with the prequels, just know this: whatever you edit on, for instance, if you use CapCut or if you use Adobe Premiere or whatever, or Premium Rush, if you use any of those, just know George Lucas is the reason why you have that, because he developed the software to make that. Where he developed software to where we're able to piggyback off of his software to use this software. George Lucas, he created Pixar. Without George Lucas, we don't get Pixar, we don't get CGI, because at the time they were using stop motion. George Lucas helped ILM develop new technology where they could make this stuff, and I think that's so unique. Without George Lucas, we don't have, editing software, for our phones and stuff. We don't have, like, 3D animated movies. And we don't really have good CGI. We'd have basic CGI. We wouldn't have good like what we have now. And I think we owe that to George Lucas. Also, I do think that, also, the acting and directing, I don't have an issue with. Like, I know some people, like Rob Zombie, said the acting feels like it's off, like Liam Neeson feels like he doesn't know how to act in this movie, which I disagree, because I feel like I will rewatching it and I pay attention to the acting. They all come off as great. The only problem I had an issue with was there's a scene in the forest where they're all looking, you could tell, because the actor, they put a helmet on his head, like, this is where Jar Jar is going to be, so you have to look at him there. And you could tell they're looking at his neck because they're trying to make eye contact with the actor, because when you're an actor, you want to make eye contact with the actor. You don't want to just look at a fake statue, and it's just so hard, especially when you're interviewing people. You want to make eye contact with them, but it's so hard because you see your face right there. That's just a nitpick of mine. And the directing, I actually thought George Lucas directed it fantastically. Like, I had no issue with George Lucas directing this movie. I thought that, he was great. I understand Ron Howard was originally supposed to direct this movie, and that was what he wanted, but then Ron Howard said, you should direct this movie, because it would have been like 3 years of Ron Howard's life if he would have made this movie, and he said he would still be making, he wouldn't have been able to make, like, other movies that he wanted to make. Like, he wouldn't have been able to make the Grinch movie, because he would still be working on Attack of the Clone, or he'd be still, like, maybe in post on this movie, and so he would not have been able to make the Grinch, which I'm so glad George has made this instead. Although I do feel some people feel like, I do think people should give George some slack, because he hadn't made a movie since 77. The last movie he directed was in 1977. So George Lucas really should get a pass on that, And also, I think from a director who's been out of the game since 77, and he did not direct Empire or Return. Although he did do some reshoots on that, but mostly it was Ivan Kershner and Richard Marquand. And he didn't direct the Indiana Jones trilogy, that was Spielberg, and Willow was Ron Howard. So he really, this was the only one he directed after A New Hope. So I think that for him to come in now, I thought that was great. He actually did a good job of directing. And I understand this is like this is what this is. But yeah, I saw online some people say that there's some characters that do not age well in the movie, such as Viceroy Gallantry, how they have certain stereotypes in the movie that do not age well. Just like on Tatooine, the Anakin slave owner has a certain type of stereotype in the movie that does not age well as well. And so I understand why, and I could see that, and I understand, and so yeah, there's some things that would probably never get, that they would not use these voice actors for those type of characters anymore, or they would not use that type of character in that sense. But, this was a different time period, and I don't think this was George Lucas's intention to create stereotypical characters. But it is what it is. I really enjoyed this movie. If you've never seen it, go watch it. It's a fun time. It's not the worst Star Wars movie, and it's definitely not the best, but it's still a really good time. It's a good, fun family flick. It'll make you laugh, make you cry. It'll make you enjoy action as it is. It's a great time, and I would absolutely get your kids to watch it. It's a fun family film. If I had to give it a grade, I would give it a solid B+. Thank you so much.